There are nights when nowhere feels like home, not because something is missing, but because nothing feels like a place to settle. You may have done everything right today. You may have gone where you were supposed to go, spoken when needed, stayed quiet when that felt safer. And still, when night arrives, there is no place inside that feels finished. No place to rest, so the mind keeps looking. Not urgently, just quietly, as if it missed something earlier and hopes it might still be found. Tonight, you don't need to find it. You don't need to decide where you belong. You don't need to arrive anywhere. Let this moment be exactly as it is. A pause before anything needs to make sense. If your body feels a little unanchored, that's all right. If your thoughts feel like they're hovering, not landing, that's all right too. Nothing is wrong. Sometimes rest doesn't come from reaching a place, but from allowing a space to form on its own. A space that doesn't ask who you are or where you should be, just a space that is here because you are here. There is nothing you need to understand tonight, nothing you need to follow. You can simply let the words pass, like shapes forming and dissolving in the dark. And while you listen, notice how the body already knows how to soften without being told. The shoulders loosen a little on their own. The breath finds a slower rhythm without effort. You're not being guided anywhere. You are being allowed to stay. Sometimes what feels like restlessness is not the absence of rest, but the absence of a place for rest to happen. The body is ready. The night is quiet enough, and still nothing feels settled, as if the room inside you has not been arranged yet, not empty, just not formed. There are nights like this, nights when the world feels slightly out of reach, not distant, just not holding you. And when that happens, the mind may try to compensate. It looks for meaning, for belonging, for a reason that explains why this moment feels unfinished. But tonight, there is no need to explain it. There is no mistake here. Some spaces are not found. They are not remembered. They are not chosen. They quietly come together when nothing is forcing them to. So instead of searching, you can allow something simpler. You can allow the sense of being placed, not placed somewhere specific, not placed correctly, just placed gently. Imagine nothing visual. No image is needed. Just notice how the body already occupies space without effort. The weight of your back meeting what supports it. The way the head is already held without being asked. Even without calling it home, the body knows how to be here. And maybe that's enough for now. A place does not have to be named to exist. It does not have to last. It does not have to mean anything. Sometimes a place is simply where nothing is being demanded. Notice how, when nothing is demanded, the breath changes on its own, not deeper, not slower on purpose, just less guarded. The space around each breath widens slightly, and in that widening, something begins to arrange itself, not as a thought, not as an idea, more like a quiet agreement between the body and the night. You do not need to belong to anything right now. You do not need to arrive. This moment does not require a name. It only requires that you stay long enough for it to become a place. And if the mind drifts, that's all right. Drifting is not leaving. It's often the first sign that the effort to stay alert is no longer needed. Let the words continue in the background. They don't need your attention. They are not pointing anywhere. They are simply keeping the space open while everything settles in its own time. There is a difference between finding a place and a place beginning. Finding implies effort, movement, a direction, but beginning does not need any of that. It happens when nothing interrupts it. Tonight, you don't need to move toward rest. You don't need to prepare for it. You don't need to deserve it. You are already here, and that is enough for something to start. Often the mind believes that rest comes after understanding, after clarity, after a sense of resolution. But some nights, understanding only keeps the surface busy. It rearranges thoughts while the deeper layers remain untouched. So tonight, let the deeper layers stay simple. Let them stay quiet. A place does not begin with answers. It begins when nothing is being asked. Notice how, when no question is waiting to be solved, the body naturally shifts, not dramatically, just subtly. A small release in the jaw, a softening behind the eyes. The breath becomes less watchful. It no longer checks whether it's doing this correctly. It simply moves. This is how a place begins, not with walls, not with definitions, but with permission. Permission to exist without explanation. You may notice that the edges of your awareness feel less sharp now. Sounds are still there, but they don't demand attention. Thoughts may still appear, but they don't insist on being finished. Everything is present, but nothing is urgent. This is not emptiness, it's arrangement. Things are quietly finding where they belong without being told. Even the sense of you can rest here, not as a role, not as a story, just as a presence that doesn't need to perform. If you feel a slight sense of drifting, that's a good sign. It means the need to stay alert is loosening. You are not losing awareness. You are allowing it to spread out like light in a room without furniture being moved. Nothing has changed, and yet everything feels less crowded. A place doesn't begin by becoming special. It begins by becoming gentle. Gentle enough that nothing needs to defend itself. Gentle enough that even tired thoughts can set themselves down. You don't need to hold this feeling. Holding would interrupt it. Just let it continue in the background. The night knows how to keep it going. Breath after breath, the body confirms that it is safe enough to soften. Not perfectly safe, not permanently safe, just safe enough for now. And for now is all this moment requires. If the mind tries to label what's happening, you can let that go. Labels belong to daytime. This space doesn't need a name. It only needs to be left undisturbed. You may notice that time feels different here, not slower, just less measured. Minutes are no longer counted. They pass without needing to be acknowledged. And in that passing, the sense of searching fades, not because it was wrong, but because it's no longer needed. You are not being led to a destination. You are being allowed to remain, and remaining without expectation is often how rest arrives. Without announcement, without instruction, just quietly, as the night continues to hold the space open for you. There is a quiet misunderstanding about presence. It is often imagined as something that arrives from somewhere else, as if calm comes toward you, as if rest enters the room. But what if presence does not arrive at all? What if it gathers, not at once, not dramatically, just gradually as nothing interrupts it? Tonight nothing needs to come to you. Nothing needs to appear. There is no center waiting to be filled. Instead, there is a soft accumulation, small moments resting next to each other, a breath that completes itself, a pause that doesn't rush into the next thing, a sensation that doesn't ask for attention, yet remains. These are not signs of something beginning. They are the beginning itself. You may notice that there is no clear boundary around this space. It doesn't start and stop. It doesn't announce itself. It simply continues because nothing is pushing it away. The body understands this kind of presence very well, long before the mind tries to define it. Muscles release not because they are told to, but because holding no longer serves a purpose. The breath does not deepen to achieve calm. It deepens because there is room. Room is important, more important than effort, more important than intention. Room allows things to take their natural shape. When there is room, even tiredness feels different. It no longer feels like something to escape from. It feels like information, a signal that something can slow down now. And slowing down does not mean stopping. It means continuing without friction. Notice how awareness can rest on more than one thing at the same time now. The breath, the weight of the body, the faint sense of sound. None of them dominate. None of them disappear. They coexist. This is what it feels like when there is no center demanding control, no single point that everything must organize around. Instead, there is balance without symmetry, stability without structure, a presence that doesn't belong to anything in particular. You don't need to hold this state. Holding would create a center, and centers create effort. Just let the experience remain uncollected, unclaimed. It does not need to be yours. It does not need to mean anything about you. It is simply happening because the conditions allow it. Sometimes the mind will try to check how long this has been going on. You can let that question pass. Time behaves differently here. It stretches, not by becoming longer, but by becoming less important. Moments don't stack, they spread. And in that spreading, the sense of nowhere being home softens, not because a home is found, but because the need for one location dissolves. When nothing is required to anchor you, everything becomes supportive. Even the absence of direction feels acceptable. Even uncertainty loses its edge. You are not floating. You are resting in something that does not need a ground. This is not something to remember. It is not a realization. It is simply how things feel when they are left alone long enough. The night continues without asking anything from you. Breath follows breath. Awareness follows itself. And presence gathers not around a center, but around permission. Permission for things to be exactly as they are. You do not need to stay awake to keep this going. It does not depend on you. It will continue even if attention drifts. even if sleep approaches, even if the words fade into the background. Nothing will be lost. Nothing needs to be protected. This space does not close when you stop watching it. It remains quietly, holding everything without claiming it. There is a moment that exists before beginnings, not the moment right before action, but the one before even the idea of starting. It's easy to miss because nothing is happening there. No signal, no instruction, no sense of progress. And yet this is often where everything quietly takes shape. Tonight you are already here, before intention, before direction. Nothing needs to be prepared. Nothing needs to be arranged by you. Notice how different this feels from waiting. Waiting implies expectation. This is not that. This is simply remaining where nothing has been decided yet. The body recognizes this space. It often relaxes into it without permission. The spine settles, not because it is corrected, but because it no longer needs to hold itself up. The breath moves without checking whether it is deep enough. Even the eyes, closed or open, rest without focus. This is not the absence of awareness. It is awareness without assignment. You may notice that thoughts still appear. That's fine. They don't need to stop. What's different now is that they don't need to go anywhere. They rise, pause briefly, and dissolve without leaving a trace. No conclusion follows them. No action is required. This is what it feels like before anything is meant to begin. Not empty, not blank, just unclaimed. A space where nothing has been named yet, and therefore nothing is limited. If the mind tries to decide what this moment is for, you can let that soften. This moment is not for improvement, not for insight, not for change. It exists without a task, and because of that, it holds you differently, gently, without expectation. The night itself seems to understand this rhythm. Sounds arrive and leave without interruption. Even silence is not complete. It breathes along with you. You may notice that the sense of time has loosened again, not disappearing, just becoming irrelevant. There is no next step waiting behind this one. There is only this sustained pause. And in this pause, nothing needs to justify itself. You do not need to feel calm for this to work. You do not need to feel peaceful. Even restlessness is allowed to remain without being fixed. Sometimes rest arrives not by resolving tension, but by letting it exist without reaction. Let the body hold what it is holding. Let the mind think what it is thinking. Neither needs guidance. They already know how to move toward rest when left alone. You are not missing anything. You have not arrived too late. This moment is not a transition. It is complete exactly as it is. Before beginnings, there is no success and no failure. There is only presence without pressure. And this kind of presence does not need you to stay awake. It does not depend on attention. It continues even as awareness becomes softer, even as words fade into the background, even as the boundary between listening and sleeping becomes less clear. Nothing has to start for rest to arrive. Nothing has to happen for this space to remain open. You are already where you need to be, not because it is the right place, but because nothing is asking you to be anywhere else. Stay here without effort, long enough for the night to take over what you no longer need to carry. There is a kind of order that does not come from control. It is not planned. It is not designed. It appears when things are allowed to be placed without being arranged, placed one by one, not in a hurry, not toward a goal, just placed where they naturally settle. Tonight, nothing needs to be moved into position. Nothing needs to be corrected. The space you are in already knows how to hold things. Notice how sensations are already arranging themselves. The weight of the body rests where it rests. The breath arrives and leaves without being adjusted. Sounds enter awareness and find their own distance. Nothing competes. Nothing demands priority. This is not randomness. It is placement without preference. When nothing is preferred, everything belongs. Even sensations that usually feel out of place are allowed to remain. A slight tightness, a wandering thought, a sense of uncertainty. They do not interrupt the space. They become part of it. There is no center that everything must face, no direction that must be honored. Each element stands on its own, yet remains connected. This is how a place forms without effort, not by bringing things together, but by letting them stop where they are. You do not need to watch this happen. Watching would turn it into a task. Just let it continue on its own. You may notice that the idea of you feels less defined here, not disappearing, just not central. The body is one element among others. The breath is another. Awareness is simply the space where they are all placed. Nothing needs to be gathered around identity. Nothing needs to confirm who you are. Things are allowed to exist without reference. This is the quiet structure of rest, not symmetrical, not perfect, but stable because nothing is forced. When something shifts, it does so naturally. When something remains, it does so without tension. This kind of placement does not exclude anything. It does not create inside and outside. There is no wrong position here. Everything that appears has a place simply because it has appeared. You may notice how this feels different from trying to relax. Trying implies resistance. Here, there is no resistance to dissolve. There is only allowance. Allowance for the night to arrange itself around you. And perhaps you can sense that nothing is being built. Nothing is being constructed. The place is not becoming more complete. It is simply revealing itself as it is. Even if sleep comes and goes, this placement remains. It does not depend on consciousness. It does not require memory. It is present whenever things are left alone. Let the words take their place too. They don't need emphasis. They don't need to be followed. They can rest among the other elements of the night. There is no message hidden here, no meaning to extract, only the experience of things being where they are without needing to justify it. And in this kind of space, rest does not arrive as an event. It spreads quietly, evenly, without drawing attention to itself. You are not entering this arrangement. You are already part of it, and you always have been. Sometimes everything begins from something very small, so small that it almost goes unnoticed. Not a grand opening, not a declaration, just a simple mark placed quietly at the beginning of the space, a small circle. Nothing inside it needs to be defined. Nothing around it needs to change. And yet, from this simple beginning, everything knows where to gather. This is not a center that pulls things toward it. It does not demand attention. It does not organize the space by force. It simply exists, and because it exists, everything else finds its own place around it. Tonight, you do not need to imagine this circle. You do not need to see it. You can sense it as a feeling of something being quietly acknowledged, not announced, not explained, just acknowledged, as if the space itself has been given permission to begin. This beginning does not require readiness. It does not require belief. It does not even require awareness. It happens before any of that. You may notice that nothing dramatic follows, no shift, no surge of calm. That is exactly right. This kind of beginning does not disturb the surface. It works underneath, like a subtle agreement that everything else can now unfold in its own time. The body responds to this kind of beginning without instruction. Breath aligns itself without being guided. Muscles release without being corrected. Even the sense of direction softens. Not because it has been removed, but because it is no longer needed. This small circle does not represent a person. It does not represent authority. It represents continuity, the sense that something has already been placed before you arrived. And because of that, you do not need to carry the responsibility of starting. You are not initiating rest. You are entering something that has already begun. This is why nothing feels rushed here. Nothing is late. Nothing is waiting for you to do it correctly. The space is already open. The beginning has already happened. You may notice that attention feels less strained now, as if it no longer needs to hold the whole structure together. It can rest near this quiet point without touching it, without analyzing it, without turning it into meaning. The small circle does not want to be understood. Understanding would make it solid. This beginning remains gentle because it stays undefined. And because it stays undefined, it remains available to every breath, available to every drifting thought, available even to sleep. You do not need to stay present to honor this beginning. It does not disappear when attention fades. It does not weaken when awareness loosens. It remains because it was never created by effort. It was placed, simply placed, at the start of the space, and from there everything else was free to arrange itself. You might sense now that nothing is missing, not because everything is complete, but because nothing needs to be added. This is what it feels like when beginning does not belong to you. When rest is not something you must enter, but something that is already here. The night recognizes this kind of beginning. It responds by slowing its edges. Sounds soften without disappearing. Thoughts lose their urgency without being silenced. The body feels less responsible for staying awake. You can let it do that. Nothing depends on your vigilance. This small beginning does not ask you to remain conscious. It only asks to be left undisturbed, and you do not need to protect it. Sleep will not erase it. Drifting will not interrupt it. This beginning exists beneath all of that. Quietly holding the arrangement in place, you are not separate from this beginning. You are not outside it. You are already within the space it allows. And because of that, there is nothing left to prepare, nothing left to decide. The night can take over now, breath by breath, moment by moment. Everything knows where to go from here. There is a relief that comes when nothing needs to stay at the center, no single point holding everything together, no place that must be protected, no position that defines the whole. This kind of space feels unfamiliar at first, because the mind is used to organizing experience around something, a thought, a feeling, a sense of self. But tonight, nothing is asking to be placed there. Nothing steps forward to claim importance. And slowly, that absence becomes a kind of freedom. When there is no center, attention spreads. It no longer tightens around one point. It no longer checks what matters most. Everything matters just enough, and that is enough for rest to deepen. You may notice that the idea of you has softened again, not disappearing, not dissolving, just no longer occupying the middle. The body breathes without reference. The breath moves without reporting back. Even awareness does not need to be aware of itself. This is not loss. It is release. Release from holding the structure together. When nothing is fixed at the center, there is nothing to defend, no edge to guard, no boundary to maintain. Even discomfort loses its sharpness, not because it is gone, but because it is no longer highlighted. It can exist without becoming the focus. This is how the night holds things. Nothing is singled out. Nothing is excluded. Everything is included without being emphasized. You may feel now that the space around thoughts has widened. Thoughts still appear, but they do not anchor. They pass through without becoming a point of reference. You do not follow them. You do not push them away. They are simply part of the movement, and movement without direction is gentle. It does not strain. It does not hurry. It does not insist on meaning. The absence of a center does not create chaos. It creates balance. Balance that does not depend on symmetry. Balance that does not require control. It is the kind of balance you feel when lying down without needing to adjust. The body knows how to rest this way. It has done it before, long before language, long before explanation. When nothing is fixed, even identity can rest, not as a question, not as a problem, just as one element among many. There is no need to check who you are right now. No need to understand how you arrived here. No need to decide what comes next. Those questions belong to a centered world. This space does not need them. Here, everything is allowed to be peripheral, and when everything is peripheral, nothing overwhelms. The breath does not lead, it does not follow, it simply continues. Sound behaves the same way. It enters, it leaves. It does not demand attention. Even silence does not claim importance. It comes and goes like everything else. This is what it feels like when nothing claims to be the source. Nothing claims to be the origin. Nothing claims to be where things come from. And in that absence, Everything feels more stable. Not because it is anchored, but because it is unburdened. You may notice that effort has become difficult now. Trying to concentrate would feel strange. Trying to stay awake would feel unnecessary. That is a good sign. It means the system no longer requires management. You are not responsible for keeping this space intact. It does not depend on your attention. It does not collapse when you stop noticing it. It is already self-sustaining. This is why sleep can come without announcement. There is no center to leave behind, no point that needs to be guarded as you drift. You are not stepping away from anything important. Nothing will be lost when awareness softens. Nothing essential is located in one place. Rest does not sit at the center. It spreads quietly, evenly, like warmth through a room without a source you can point to. You do not need to remember this feeling. Memory would turn it into a thing. This is not a thing. It is simply how experience feels when nothing is fixed, when nothing insists on being held, when nothing demands to be where everything else revolves. The night understands this well. It has no center, no beginning, no end. It continues by allowing everything to move without resistance. You can let yourself move with it now, not forward, not downward, just away from holding, away from maintaining, away from needing to be anywhere specific. Nothing is asking you to stay awake. Nothing is asking you to notice more. Nothing is asking you to do anything at all. And in that absence of demand, rest finds you, not as an arrival, but as a quiet continuation of what is already happening. There comes a point when words no longer need to carry meaning. They have done their work, not by explaining anything, but by staying long enough for the space to hold itself. You may already notice that the sound of this voice feels different now, not closer, not farther, just less important. It is still here, but it no longer asks to be followed. That is exactly how it is meant to be. You don't need to listen carefully anymore. You don't need to understand what is being said. The words can soften. They can lose their edges. They can blur into the background of the night. Meaning begins to loosen when it is no longer needed. Sentences no longer need to complete themselves. They can trail off. They can repeat without arriving anywhere. This is not confusion. It is release. Release from holding language together. Release from tracking what comes next. The mind can let go of following. The ears can hear without translating. Sound becomes just sound, a vibration moving through the quiet. You may notice that even silence has texture now. It is not empty. It is layered, breath moving within it, distant sounds passing through, the subtle rhythm of the night continuing. The voice does not need to disappear. It only needs to stop leading. And when it stops leading, everything else comes forward gently. The body feels heavier without effort. The space around thoughts widens again. Even the idea of listening becomes unnecessary. You are not listening. Sound is simply happening. You do not need to stay with it. You can drift in and out. The voice will not ask you to come back. It does not need your attention to continue. Meaning fades before sound does. And when meaning fades, rest deepens, because nothing is being processed, nothing is being evaluated, Nothing is being held. Words become like breath, present but not demanding. They rise, they fall, they leave no trace. You may notice now that it is harder to recall the last sentence. That is not a problem. It is a sign that the mind has stopped gripping. You do not need to remember anything from here. There is nothing worth remembering, only this soft continuation. The voice may seem slower now, or farther away, or less distinct. You don't need to decide which. These are just different ways the mind lets go. The body understands this moment. It often responds by sinking, not sinking downward, but inward, settling into what is already supporting it. The breath becomes less noticeable, not because it stops, but because it no longer needs attention. Everything that needed to be said has already been said, not in words, in rhythm, in repetition, in the way nothing was forced. Now the words are free to fade, to repeat, to blur. They can remain present without being meaningful, or they can disappear for long stretches. Either way is fine. Nothing depends on them. You may hear the voice as if from another room, or as if it is part of the night itself. You do not need to stay awake to find out. If sleep comes, it is welcome. If drifting happens, it is allowed. If awareness fades and returns, nothing is disrupted. The space does not close when you stop noticing it. It stays open on its own. Sound becomes the last thread, and even that thread does not need to be held. Soon only sound will remain, not carrying meaning, not pointing anywhere, just present, just enough to keep the night company. You do not need to follow the sound into sleep. Sleep will come on its own. The voice will remain as long as it needs to, and when it fades, nothing will be missing. Nothing important will be gone. Rest will continue without instruction, without language, without effort. At some point, listening itself becomes optional, not because sound is gone, but because there is no need to stay with it. You may already feel that attention comes and goes without effort. Sometimes the voice is noticed, sometimes it isn't. Both are fine. Nothing changes when attention drifts. Nothing is lost when awareness softens. The sound continues without asking to be heard. You do not need to follow the rhythm. You do not need to stay awake to keep this going. The night does not depend on your presence. It does not pause when you drift. It does not wait for understanding. Sound moves on its own, like breath, like the body settling a little more each moment. The meaning of words has already faded. Now even their shape can fade. They can repeat. They can stretch. They can become almost indistinguishable from silence. You might notice long spaces between phrases. Those spaces are not empty. They are doing most of the work now. In the quiet, the body continues what it knows. Muscles release without instruction. The breath finds its own depth. The sense of weight becomes more complete. Nothing is being adjusted. Nothing is being corrected. Everything is allowed to continue exactly as it is. You may no longer remember what was said a moment ago. That is expected. Memory is not needed here. The mind does not need to collect anything. There is nothing to take with you, only this ongoing softness. Sound remains as a gentle presence, not guiding, not explaining, just accompanying the night. You may hear the voice as part of the background or as something very far away, or not at all for stretches of time. All of these are signs that rest is deepening. You are not required to notice them. Even noticing is optional now. The space holds itself. It does not collapse when attention fades. It does not require awareness to stay open. It has already been prepared. Prepared not by effort, but by allowing everything to settle at its own pace. The night moves forward without direction. Time becomes loose. Minutes pass without being counted. There's no sense of progression here, only continuation. If sleep comes, let it come. If it comes and goes, let it do that. Nothing needs to be stabilized. Nothing needs to be maintained. You are not holding this moment together. It is holding itself. The sound remains just enough to prevent silence from becoming noticeable, just enough to keep the night company. You do not need to stay with it. You do not need to follow it. You do not need to hear it clearly. It will remain whether you are listening or not. This is not the end of anything. There is no ending to arrive at. There is only this slow, even continuation. The body knows what to do now. The mind no longer needs instruction. Everything that could let go has already begun to do so. Rest does not need a signal. It spreads on its own, quietly, evenly, without effort. There is nothing left that needs to be carried, not because everything has been resolved, but because nothing is being held anymore. The night is wide enough now, wide enough to receive whatever remains without naming it. You may notice that even the sense of waiting has softened. There is no longer an expectation for something else to happen. This moment is not preparing the next one. It is simply continuing. Breath continues. Sound continues. The body continues to rest where it is. No adjustment is needed. The mind does not need to check its state. Whether thoughts appear or not no longer matters. They can pass without engagement. They can linger without meaning. Everything that arrives is allowed to stay briefly and leave. Nothing is kept. Nothing is rejected. This is how the night holds things, without organizing, without sorting, just receiving. You may feel that awareness itself is less defined, not fading completely, just loosening its edges, like light spread thin across a room. There is no single point where attention rests. It floats, it settles, it moves again, all without effort. You do not need to bring it back. You do not need to stay with anything. The night is doing the holding now. The body recognizes this. It often responds by becoming heavier, not uncomfortable, just more complete, more present in its own weight. Muscles let go of unnecessary tone. The breath deepens slightly, not on purpose, but because there is room. Even if sleep does not come immediately, rest is already here. Rest does not wait for sleep. It arrives earlier, quieter, less noticeable. You do not need to welcome it. It is already present. If the voice fades in and out, that is fine. If it disappears for long moments, that is fine too. Nothing needs to be tracked. Nothing needs to be remembered. The night does not ask for participation. It only asks that you stop carrying, and you already have. Now even the idea of resting can fade. There is no need to notice how relaxed the body is, no need to measure how quiet the mind feels. Those ideas belong to waking. Here, nothing is evaluated. Sound becomes part of the background. Breath becomes part of the background. Even the sense of time softens further. Moments no longer connect to each other. They do not form a sequence. They simply pass. You may not remember when this section began. You may not notice when it ends. That is exactly right. The voice is no longer leading anything. It is simply present, like distant weather, sometimes audible, sometimes not. The night does not change when it fades. Everything important continues without it. The body already knows how to sleep. It does not need instruction. The mind already knows how to drift. It does not need permission. If sleep comes now, nothing is interrupted. If it comes later, nothing is delayed. There is no schedule here, no destination, no final point, only this slow, even unfolding. You do not need to stay awake to finish anything. Nothing remains unfinished. Everything that needed to settle has already found its place. The night can continue on its own. Sound will remain as long as it is needed, and when it changes, nothing is lost. You can let go completely now. There is nothing left to listen for, nothing left to follow, nothing left to do. There is nothing else you need to do. Sometimes peace is not something we must learn. It is something we remember. The world pulls us outward, toward goals, toward noise, toward endless motion. But when the heart grows quiet, we begin to sense a deeper rhythm beneath it all, a rhythm that has always been waiting, softly calling us home. This quiet home lives inside you, but it can be easy to forget. That is why Gassho exists, not to add anything new, but to help you return. A space built for stillness, for reflection, for the gentle work of being. In its name, Gassho, there is a gesture, two hands meeting in respect and gratitude, a gesture of unity between self and world, between heart and breath, between sound and silence. When you open the Gassho app, you are not entering another screen. You are stepping into a small temple that travels with you, a place where you can sit without expectation, breathe without demand, and listen without effort. Inside you will find guided meditations, stories inspired by Buddhist wisdom, and the steady presence of sutras, not as lessons, but as companions. The sound you are about to hear is one of those companions, a sound carried through generations, a sound shaped by breath, devotion, and time. You do not need to understand the words. You do not need to follow the rhythm. You do not need to stay awake for it. Let the sound arrive as it is. Let it move through awareness without resistance. Let it remain even as attention fades. There is nothing left to do, only to rest. Let the breath settle. Let the body sink, and simply listen. The sound of the sutra continues, offered from a temple in the quiet mountains of Koya-san, shared here through the Gassho app whenever you wish to return to silence.